This episode of the Fiction Writers Podcast is brought to you by How to Write a Novel That Sells. Do you dream of writing a best-selling fiction novel? With the right tools, you could get there sooner than you think. Visit www.howtowriteanovelthatsells.com and unlock the secrets to writing compelling fiction taught by international best-selling author Lana Mcara. Welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana Mcara, where you will discover tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Here you'll find new energy, new perspectives, new resources, and new ideas that will spark your creativity into a blaze of brilliance. It's easier than you think. Be sure you visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, get out your notebook, tune in, and let's get started.
Have you ever wondered what causes someone to start writing fiction when they've been in business all their life? That's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Lana Mcara, and welcome to the Fiction Writers Podcast. Tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Today, I am excited to talk to Dr. James R. Gregory. He is a dynamic force behind a highly successful global brand management consulting company he co-founded alongside his wife, Evelyn Clyburn, in New York City. Together, they achieved 40 years of success and sold the business in 2013. Afterward, Jim earned his doctorate from Muma College of Business at the University of South Florida. He began writing stories, which evolved into a series of exhilarating novellas known as Small Fortunes, featuring the unforgettable characters of Steve Stackhouse, Jim, and Nancy Crocker, Evelyn. Small Fortunes became an Amazon bestseller and branded Jim as the king of short reads. Welcome, Jim.
Oh, thank you so much, Lana. It's nice to be with you.
That is so funny that you took your own relationship and made it into some stories. Did you actually have funny things that happened that you could write?
There are numerous funny things that happened, but this actually has done really well with business people. This book, because many people work with their spouses, and many people are interested in how to do that and how to build a business, and so there are a lot of business lessons in this. But it is a true story. Other than the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Or the guilty.
Or the guilty. And many of the situations in there are absolutely real. And how we started the business, how it got moving, how it grew, how we found a unique niche for ourselves, which was in corporate branding and measuring the corporate brand, how that translated into a real business proposition that grew. And so we weren't just dealing with small companies. All of a sudden, we were dealing with Fortune 100 companies because they were interested in growing value in their corporate brands. So it was a pretty new concept when we started. But we took it and ran. And one of the key things in the whole process was writing books about our discoveries. So I wrote a whole slew of business books. And what was wonderful about that is McGraw-Hill was my publisher, and my client was Business Week, which McGraw-Hill owned. So it was a win-win-win situation. They had an advocate who was promoting the idea of building the value of your brand. They had their own advertising, built-in advertising, so they promoted us and promoted the book. And then to sell the books, we had a built-in audience we would go to various luncheons and sign the books and give them away, and then give a short talk. Well, I did that all around the world for Business Week. It was fabulous. I wish I could do it over.
Wow, that's saying something. That is terrific. What a life.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. And from the beginning, the 40 years, it was my wife and I originally for many years. And we were and are today good partners, good buddies, and get along well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you went from this New York City agency and you wrote 5 books relating to what you were doing in your business. So what caused this pivot into fiction?
Well, when I retired, I did want to write a story about the business that we had built, and so that is called Small Fortunes, and has done very, very well. It's an international bestseller through Amazon, and that book got me excited about writing again. Got me excited to say, hey, you don't really need to write business books. You can have fun with your books and maybe push a little bit into the fiction area. And the second thing that happened was the COVID just wiped out so many people in terms of their emotional energy. One of the things I did was worked with my brothers and said, hey, let's tell the story of growing up in this small town, Pennsylvania, Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and from our different perspectives. I was the youngest in the family, and the title of the book is Columbia the Street. Well, this is a visual of it, Columbia the Street, and it did exceptionally well. I mean, it was our COVID project because I wanted my brothers to be able to do something, not that they didn't do anything, but to have a project we could work on together without being face to face. And we had a blast doing that. And the book got a lot of readership and got a lot of energy. People were excited to see that book. And just to give you an idea, it's called Columbia the Street. Columbia was the street we lived on. I thought it was so much the center of the universe that Columbia University and Columbia the country were named after our street. So keep in mind, I was a young child at that time. So that all went very well, and I had the idea of writing Zephyr's War after I attended a conference in Ukraine where I was one of the keynote speakers, and I noticed that there was this hostility between the Russian attendees and the Ukrainians, and I didn't understand it. There were demonstrations going on in the streets. Had been some news stories, but I didn't quite put them all together and understand clearly what the political issues were. And when I came back, that kept bothering me. And that combined with the Chernobyl meltdown of their nuclear power plant was kind of like two very interesting things that I thought I could pick up on and write about. And that was the inspiration for the start of the story.
Okay. Wow. Isn't it amazing? It is to me that where the ideas come from, you're going through your daily life and all of a sudden, boom, you get this, you're like your head explodes with this idea and it leads to so many other things. And life experience is wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. And you never know where the inspiration is going to come from. It's I find that it's a lot of fun to write down the concept as soon as you can. And it doesn't have to be a full thought out concept, but the idea of the Chernobyl, the idea of these and what happened to those people? What happened to the people who were completely wiped out? Their entire families were destroyed. And the only thing that saved these two main characters was the fact that they were off at college at the time, but they couldn't go home. Their families had all died. So those were my characters. That's how I set up the character concept. And then the ambition, Zephyr was trying to explain to Ziggy, his younger brother, who was very depressed about losing his family, which is perfectly natural, but trying to create a vision for the future. Listen, our lives are not over. We can go to America. Let's do that. Let's go to America. Oh, what the heck? And let's become capitalists and let's drink champagne and eat caviar and smoke cigars. Zep picks up a little stick and pretends it's a cigar. And that was the first thing that Ziggy, his younger brother, grasped. And from that point on, they're on their way.
Very interesting. So do you plan your books ahead of time, or are you one of those people that just sits down and starts blasting off?
I sit down and blast off. I mean, I write one sentence and then write another one, and it goes from there. In fact, in that description I just gave you is like in the middle of the book, and my book starts midway through their New York life. So it's a very interesting, and is that you can edit it and change it and move things around, but I liked it. I kind of liked the way it flowed. You don't really know who the bad guys are in my book until you get well into it, and not till the very end that you're sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I always love books where the bad guy has a good reason, and he might be doing things that aren't really good, but yet he's got his reason, and you kind of get it. You kind of from their perspective, you can see why they did it. But these characters are cartoonish. The ones that they're evil for evil's sake.
Yes, that's interesting. I really tried to make my bad guys really bad, so bad that I cringed. When I have trouble writing a paragraph that describes what this guy does in his prison cell, it just like, whoa, I don't know if this is going to work. And I read it to my wife, who gives me the thumbs up or thumbs down. If she gives me the thumbs down, I don't even ask why. I just say, oh, okay, got it.
A little too far that time.
That's right.
Yeah. So, do you use real people as like a model for some of your characters, or do you just make them up?
There are portions of real people in all of my characters. I try to make them up, and I have in my mind's eye, I know what they look like. I know what their attitudes are. I know their background, but I don't necessarily spell it all out in my story. There is a case where Zep meets with this Steve Stackhouse, and who is in this story, by the way. And so they meet, and they're trying to do a deal, and Zep pushes across this attaché case that's filled with $100 bills, pushes it across to him, but doesn't remove his hand from the top of the case. So he pushes it across the table, but has his hand on the top of the case. That experience happened with me, and the anxiety that puts you through, and the dynamic, the tension of, are we going to do this deal or are we not? Are you looking to get something out of me in this deal or not? Or why are you doing this? And all those things go through your mind until he moves his hand. And when he moves his hand, the deal is done. Well, it's, I had that experience, and I didn't intend for that to be in the story. It just was such a logical place for it, and it was such a logical kind of, I can only think of the word dynamic situation where they're negotiating and closing the deal.
Yes, that little thing there of leaving your hand on the case is so interesting. It means a comma. It's not a period.
That's right. Soon to be followed by an exclamation point. but you can't put them in without words.
Right, exactly. And I believe that's the difference between a writer that is just kind of muddling through and someone who really gets it, because the nuances are where the difference is made in your story, where the person reading it is like, wow, it went right in, instead of being some kind of head game where they're thinking about the words. They're really getting the meaning behind it. So hats off to you for that little thing. That's going to stick with me for the rest of the day, by the way.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So is Zephyr's War, would you call that your first novel?
Yeah, I think so. It's a first pure fiction. There were, it's every aspect of it is fiction. Unlike Small Fortunes, where I had actual experiences that I fictionized, this is fiction all the way.
Okay. And so you have a new book coming out soon?
Yes. This one is called Killer App, and it's about artificial intelligence. I'm really happy with this book. It's such an interesting book because everyone's worst fears about artificial intelligence is that it somehow take over your life or take over your job. And this little nasty artificial intelligence lady, which is her name is Artificial Intelligence Made Easy, Amy, in short. And so she starts communicating with him and slowly takes over his life. And since she has complete access to his computer, she begins to notice things on here that are, need to be, she thinks he needs to correct. Things like his love life, things like his girlfriend from college. And so this is your worst fears. Oh, he's a journalist, and she takes over the paper. She stops the presses on an article she doesn't like, and that nobody can understand what had happened. Even the main character, I have no idea. And she says, "Well, I know, I did it."
Oh, wow.
And here's why I did it. And suddenly, everybody says, "Oh my God, this app that you have has to come off your computer," but it won't come off. It doesn't. You can't take it out. So it's really interesting and fun. This is really a pretty fun book, I think. The story is fun, and it's written in a lighthearted way for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And the other story that we included here is one called Artifacts. Artifacts is about archaeology. I have a great love of archaeology. And both my wife and I are certification students as archaeologists. We've been doing this for years. But the thing about Artifacts is that it's a story about things that you find and connecting the present with the past in the things that you find. And it's almost sci-fi. He finds something that goes back to the Jamestown colony, and there's John Smith, Captain John Smith. So he's relating to that person, but all of a sudden he's part of the John Smith troop, and how they get him back into everyday life or contemporary life is what that story is all about. This fascinating, really fascinating. Took my love with archaeology and made it into a story.
Yeah, that is fascinating. The time travel and the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your publishing journey. When you started to consider fiction as opposed to nonfiction you were doing before, what steps did you take then to think about publishing?
That's interesting. Well, I had a very clear-cut path when I was writing business books. They weren't necessarily easy, but the path was clear. And working with McGraw-Hill, they had a foreign language division. They had all the things that you needed all laid out. Um, but there were frustrating things as well. You couldn't deviate from their system. You couldn't, if you had a good idea and suggested it to them, if it didn't match their criteria, you couldn't do it, period. So when I started writing for myself, I started self-publishing. So Small Fortunes is self-published. I worked with an organization called Bestseller Publishing, who I highly recommend for independents. And then Morgan James, they were very interested in this new book, Zephyr's War. Even though they don't do a lot of fiction, I was able to talk to Dave Hancock, the CEO there, about this particular approach and what I envisioned. And he said, that sounds good. Let's do it. And it was as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went from a major publisher to an independent to another major publisher.
Yes, I'm published with Morgan James as well.
Oh,
yeah,
good. You know their process.
Yeah. They're highly respected in the field. Yeah.
And it's totally collaborative. If you want to change something, do something different, they're all for supporting you. And I think that's just really cool.
Yes, it was a totally different experience because all of my previous publishing had been with traditional houses. And I had the same experience where they tell you what they want, what they don't want, and so forth. But with Morgan James, they were very accommodating and very helpful. I love the cover of my book, and the cover of your book is great as well. So they do very well on covers, and I think covers are super important. That's your first impression, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They've got a really, really solid team behind them. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, that's really interesting. I had no idea you were a Morgan James author. Which, yeah, that's awesome. So, you have two now. What about three? Is there a third one in the works?
There is. It's called Ghost Town. It will probably come out late 2025. Yeah, I would think that. And it's an interesting story about a gentleman who was an entrepreneur, wanted to do, and this is in the 1800s, wanted to be like Andrew Carnegie or Rockefeller, and although he wasn't there at that time, but like Andrew Carnegie for sure. And so he bought a coal mine, and the coal mine was very successful, but there was a flood, and then it kind of destroyed the infrastructure around the coal mine. So he went from rising star to nothing, rags to riches. Well, it wasn't. It was riches to rags, really.
Yeah.
And he was blamed for a number of things, including the Johnstown flood. So that's the story, and it's interesting. It's not purely historical fiction, but there's a lot of history that you can read into it. And I've got my first draft is done, and I'm editing it now.
Okay. Wow. That's really great. So that is an interesting story. The Johnstown flood is such like a historical mythology around the whole thing. It would be good. And so your book is based on the truth of the Johnstown flood, right?
Well, no, my brother's book is based on the truth. His book is called The Boss's Club. And if anybody's interested in the Johnstown flood, that is the definitive book to get. His name is Richard Gregory. My book, I didn't want it to interfere with his book, so mine is a different approach. I don't use the word Johnstown.
Okay.
But if you are aware of the story, you can start to make connections to it.
Okay, I see. Well, that is really tricky.
Yeah, we'll see if I can pull it off. Might not.
Yeah, you can take advantage of all the drama of it, without actually going into that. Yeah, and that's totally your choice. It's totally fine. As long as you're not claiming it's accurate history, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm gonna have the biggest disclaimer in the front.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So, where can we find you?
My website is jamesrgregory-books.com. And that's the best place to go because that has all my current information. And I'd be happy to communicate with people. I'm trying to build up my mailing list so I can have people that are interested in reading, doing reads of various chapters or the whole book. It's one of the things that is really tough to get. Are people who like your work and are interested in reading it and critiquing it. Takes a certain kind of person to do that.
Yes, yes. I call them beta readers, and I love my beta readers. They are so helpful because they catch the things we can't see because we're too deep in the weeds.
Absolutely. I have a group of Saturday sleuths, we call them. Every Saturday we get together and critique each other's chapter, the latest chapter. Hugely helpful. Hugely. It's just incredibly important and helpful.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So we have a special offer, and it's for people who comment on the YouTube video. So if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, go over to YouTube, find the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana Mcara, and leave a comment. And what is the gift, Jim?
Well, this new book, is called Ghost Town, and I would love to be able to provide that to various people who respond. So you get first time to take a look, and it would be helpful if you make a comment on it because I would be able to then incorporate those ideas and get some feedback. So you have a chance to kind of manage a book.
Yeah, you have input, real input. Yeah, that's great. So what advice would you leave with someone who's thinking about shifting from business to fiction?
Most important thing is do it because you love it. Don't do it to get rich. There's not a wealth making opportunity unless you hit it really big. I think maybe with all the books that I've written over time, I maybe have paid for one in terms of the income, but do it because you love it. And there's a lot of help out there for that type of person.
Yes, that's such good advice because if you love it, you're enjoying the process. It isn't all just about the book itself. It's about being in that wonderful creative space and having those fun ideas and laughing over your keyboard and struggling to write the villain.
That's right.
All those things. Yeah, they're so amazing. What a wonderful life it is.
It is.
Five. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been an amazing conversation. I've truly enjoyed it.
I've had so much fun. Thank you so much.
And thank you for being with us today. My name is Lana Mcara. See you next time.
Thank you for tuning into the Fiction Writers Podcast with Lana Mcara, where we share tips, tricks, and ideas for fiction that is #unputdownable. Remember to visit our website at www.fictionwriterspodcast.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Fiction Writers Podcast.